What if the real story wasn't what you saw in public, but what was happening quietly behind the scenes the entire time? Because right now, people are reacting to something Candace Owens said that completely flipped how some viewers see Erika and even Charlie Kirk. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a full breakdown. Just a few carefully placed words that made people stop and think. But then, something changed. Those words started connecting to past moments in a way no one expected. And this is where it gets strange. If those connections mean what people think they do, then the story everyone believed might not be the real one at all. To understand why this is hitting so hard, you have to look at how things appeared on the surface before Candace Owens said anything. Because publicly, everything looked structured, predictable, like a system that knew exactly what it was doing. At the center of that system was Charlie Kirk. His messaging, his presence, his control over direction, it all felt consistent, intentional. And for a long time, people assumed that meant everything happening around him was fully aligned with his decisions. But then something changed. Candace didn't attack directly. She didn't lay out a full accusation. Instead, she hinted at something more subtle, something happening behind the scenes that might not match what people were seeing publicly. And that's where everything started to shift. Because once that idea was introduced, people began looking at past moments differently. Interactions that once seemed normal now felt calculated. Decisions that once seemed straightforward now raised questions. And this is where it gets strange. Erika's role, which had often been seen as secondary or supportive, suddenly felt more central, not visibly, but strategically. But here's the problem. None of it was clearly explained. Just fragments, hints, connections people were making on their own. And that's what made it powerful. Because now, the story wasn't being told directly. It was being uncovered, piece by piece. And once people started putting those pieces together, the entire narrative began to look very different. It started with a moment that didn't look important at all. Just a short segment during a longer discussion. Candace Owens was talking about leadership, how influence works, how decisions get made, and how sometimes the person in front isn't the only one shaping what's happening. At first, it sounded general, something you could apply to any situation. But then something changed. She paused, and instead of moving on, she added one line that shifted everything. She said, "Not every decision comes from the person you think it does." That line hit differently, because it wasn't specific, but it felt targeted. And this is where it gets strange. She didn't mention Charlie Kirk. She didn't mention Erika. But the context? Too close to ignore, because people had already been watching the dynamic between them, already noticing small moments, subtle shifts, things that didn't fully add up. And once that line dropped, those moments started to matter. But here's the problem. There was still no direct claim, no confirmation, just implication. And implication leaves room for people to connect dots. And that's exactly what happened. And it doesn't stop there. A clip resurfaced. Older. Easy to miss before. In it, Charlie is speaking during an event confident, direct, as always. But behind the scenes, there's a moment. Quick. Almost invisible. Where Erika appears to signal something. A glance. A gesture. Small. But now, it felt different. Because after that moment, Charlie adjusted, slightly, changed direction, changed tone. And once people saw that, they couldn't unsee it. Because now, the question wasn't just about what was said, it was about how it was being guided. And that's when things started falling apart. Because more clips started resurfacing, more moments where interactions looked coordinated. Not obvious, but consistent. And consistency like that raised question. But then something changed again. Another comment from Candace Owens surfaced. This one even shorter. She said, "Influence doesn't always look like control." That line spread fast, because now it added context to everything else. It suggested that whatever was happening wasn't direct. It wasn't obvious. It was subtle, strategic. And that made the situation feel more serious. because subtle influence is harder to see, harder to prove, but often more powerful. And this is where the tension really started building, because now people weren't just watching Charlie. They were watching everything around him, who he interacted with, how those interactions happened, when decisions shifted, and weirdly, patterns started appearing. Moments where things aligned just a little too perfectly. Moments where direction changed without clear reason. Moments where Erika's presence, though quiet, seemed connected to those shifts. And that's what made it intense. Because now, the story wasn't about one big moment. It was about many small ones, all pointing in the same direction. But the biggest twist? Still no direct explanation. No one confirming anything. No one breaking it down clearly. Just fragments, hints, and a growing sense that something was happening behind the scenes that people hadn't noticed before. And just when it seemed like the speculation couldn't go any further, another piece surfaced. And this one, it didn't just raise questions. It made everything feel a lot more intentional. The next piece didn't come from a new clip. It came from a pattern people hadn't been looking for before. Because once that idea, subtle influence, was introduced, viewers went back and started watching entire conversations differently. Not just what was said, but how it was said. And this is where it gets strange. They noticed timing. Not obvious at first, but consistent. Moments where Charlie Kirk would begin explaining something one way, then suddenly shift direction mid-sentence. Not randomly, almost like he was adjusting. And once people noticed it, they started asking why. But here's the problem. There was no clear trigger, no interruption, no external factor forcing that change. Just a subtle pivot. And it doesn't stop there. In several of those moments, Erika was present. Not speaking, not leading, just there. And yet, the timing of those shifts kept aligning with her presence. And that's when things started falling apart. Because now, it didn't look like coincidence anymore. It looked like influence. But then, something changed again. A longer clip surfaced. This one, harder to ignore. In it, Charlie is speaking confidently structured, direct, exactly how people expect him to be. But halfway through, he pauses, just for a second, looks slightly off camera, then continues but with a noticeably different tone, more cautious, more measured. And once people saw that, they started connecting it to everything else. Because that pause, it didn't have an obvious reason, but it had timing. And that timing raised questions. And this is where the tension really escalated. Because now, people weren't just seeing isolated moments. They were seeing a pattern of adjustment, a sequence of subtle changes happening in real time. But the biggest twist? Candace's earlier comments suddenly made more sense. Because when she said influence doesn't always look like control, this is exactly what that looks like. Not direct orders. Not visible direction, but small, consistent shifts. And that idea? It spread fast. Because now, the narrative wasn't about manipulation in an obvious sense. It was about influence in a subtle one. And that's much harder to ignore. But here's where things got even more intense. People started asking a deeper question. If these shifts were happening, were they intentional? Because there's a difference between coincidence and consistency. And when consistency shows up again and again, it starts to feel like design. But still, no confirmation, no explanation, no direct acknowledgement from anyone involved. Just silence. And that silence, it made everything louder. Because now, every new clip felt like more evidence. Every moment felt more significant. And every unanswered question made the story bigger. And that's when everything started connecting. Because the more people watched, the more it felt like something had been happening all along. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, quietly, behind the scenes. And just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more intense, another piece surfaced, and this time, it didn't just suggest influence. It hinted at something much more deliberate. The next piece didn't come from a clip or a pause or even a gesture. It came from what people didn't see. Because once viewers started focusing on patterns, they noticed something even more telling than those subtle shifts. What was missing? And this is where it gets strange. Certain topics would come up and then disappear just as quickly. Not fully addressed, not explored, just redirected. And once people noticed that, they started asking a different question. Who was deciding what not to say? But here's the problem. There was no obvious answer. Because on the surface, Charlie Kirk was still the one speaking, still leading, still controlling the conversation. But beneath that, there were moments where direction changed too smoothly, too quickly, like something unseen was guiding it. And it doesn't stop there. A compilation started circulating. Not one clip, multiple, back to back, showing moments where conversations shifted at critical points. And weirdly, those shifts happened at the same kind of moments. Right when things were about to go deeper. Right when details were about to be expanded. And that's when things started falling apart. Because now, it didn't just look like influence. It looked like filtering. Like certain directions were being allowed, and others were being avoided. But then something changed again. A comment resurfaced from Candace Owens that people had overlooked before. She said, "Sometimes the most powerful control is deciding what never gets discussed." That line hit harder now than it did before, because suddenly, it felt like a direct explanation, not of one moment, but of a pattern. And once people connected that, everything escalated. Because now, the story wasn't just about influence. It was about boundaries. Invisible owns, shaping what people heard and what they didn't. But here's where the tension really peaked. Because once you start noticing what's missing, you can't stop. Every conversation feels incomplete. Every shift feels intentional. Every silence feels loaded. And that's exactly what happened. Because now, people weren't just watching clips. They were watching for absence. Looking for moments where something should have been said, but wasn't. And those moments, they kept appearing. And that's what made it intense. Because the pattern wasn't loud. It was quiet, consistent, subtle enough to go unnoticed at first, but impossible to ignore once seen. And that's when everything reached its peak tension. Because now, the narrative had completely changed. From what's being said to what's being controlled. And that's a much bigger story. Because if conversations are being guided behind the scenes, then what people are seeing publicly is only part of what's actually happening. And that realization, it spread fast. Because now, the question wasn't just about Erika, or Charlie, or even Candace. It was about the structure of influence itself, how it works, how it hides, and how it shapes perception without being obvious. But just when it seemed like the story couldn't get more serious, it did. Because now, it wasn't just viewers noticing patterns. People closer to the situation started reacting. And that's when everything escalated. And that's when everything shifted from quiet observation to something that felt way more serious. Because now, it wasn't just viewers connecting dots. It was people closer to the situation reacting. Not loudly, not directly, but in ways that were impossible to ignore. And this is where it gets strange. A few individuals who had previously appeared alongside Charlie Kirk started changing their tone, not addressing anything directly, but speaking more carefully, more measured, like they were aware of something, but choosing not to say it. And that shift, it didn't go unnoticed. But here's the problem: no one explained it. No one clarified what had changed. Just subtle differences in how people spoke. And that silence, it amplified everything. And it doesn't stop there. A comment surfaced from someone loosely connected to those same circles. They wrote, "People think leadership is always visible. It isn't." That line spread fast. Because now, it felt like someone was indirectly confirming the idea. Not proving it, but acknowledging it. And that raised the stakes immediately. Because now, this wasn't just speculation from the outside. It felt like something being hinted at from the inside. But then something changed again. Candace Owens spoke once more. And this time, Her tone was sharper, more direct than before. She said, "The problem isn't who's speaking, it's who's influencing what gets said." That line hit instantly, because now the idea wasn't subtle anymore. It was clear. There was influence. The question was just how much. And that's when things started falling apart even faster. Because now, people went back again, rewatching everything. But this time, with a different focus. Not just looking for patterns, but looking for control. Moments where conversations shifted. Moments where topics disappeared. Moments where direction changed. And suddenly, there were a lot of those moments. More than people expected. And that realization, it made everything feel bigger. Because now, it wasn't just a theory. It felt like a structure. Something consistent. Something repeating. But here's where the tension really peaked. Because Erika finally reacted. Not directly addressing Candace. Not confirming anything. Just a short statement. She said, "People create narratives when they don't understand the full picture." That line hit hard. Because now, it wasn't silence anymore. It was pushback, but still indirect. And that made everything more intense. Because now, people had something to interpret. And they did. Some saw it as denial. Others saw it as avoidance. And that division, it made the story even bigger. Because now, it wasn't just about what was happening. It was about how people chose to see it. And that's when everything reached its peak. Because now, all the pieces were in place. Candace's statements, the resurfaced clips, the patterns, the reactions. And still, no clear answer. And that's what made it worse. Because now, the question wasn't just, is this real? It was, why isn't anything being explained clearly? And that question, it kept growing. Because the longer it went unanswered, the more serious it felt. And then, the biggest twist hit. Not another hint. Not another reaction. Something deeper. Something that didn't just add to the story, it reframed it completely. And if what people are saying about it is true, then everything we've seen so far might not mean what we think it does. And then, the piece that finally brought everything into focus appeared. Not a leak. Not a hidden clip. Something much simpler. Context. Because once people stepped back from the clips, the pauses, the reactions, and looked at the full conversations, instead of isolated moments, a different picture started to form. And this is where it gets strange. Those shifts everyone was pointing to, they were real, but not in the way people thought. Because when you watch the full, unedited versions of those conversations, the changes in tone, the pauses, the redirections, they weren't signals of control. They were responses, natural adjustments, reactions to the flow of discussion, to timing, to audience. But here's the problem. Once those moments were clipped, shortened, and placed side by side, they looked like a pattern, a deliberate one. And that's what changed everything. Because now, it wasn't just about what happened. It was about how it was presented. And it doesn't stop there. When people compared the full conversations to the viral clips, they noticed something important. Context had been removed. Transitions had been cut. Moments that explained the shifts were gone. And without those pieces, the story looked completely different. And that's the reveal. Not that there was hidden manipulation happening behind the scenes, but that a narrative formed from incomplete information. Because when you isolate moments, you can make almost anything look intentional, even when it isn't. And once that narrative took hold, everything else started aligning with it. The clips, the reactions, the speculation, all building on the same missing context. And if that's true, then the biggest twist isn't about Erika, or Charlie, or even Candace. It's about how easily perception can change. When you only see part of the story, when you step back and look at everything together, the clips, the pauses, the reactions, and finally the full context, it stops being about hidden control. It becomes about how easily patterns can be created. Because what this situation really shows isn't just about Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, or Erika. It's about perception. Think about it. Take a few moments, remove the context, place them side by side, and suddenly, it looks like a pattern, even if it wasn't one to begin with. And this is where it hits deeper. Our brains are wired to connect dots, to find meaning, to build a story even when we don't have all the pieces. And that's exactly what happened here. The more people watched those clips, the more they believed they were seeing something intentional. Because once a narrative starts forming, everything begins to fit into it. Even normal behavior, even natural reactions. And that's what makes this so powerful. Not just what was said, but how it was interpreted. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Not that something hidden was exposed, but that something incomplete was turned into something convincing. And once that happens, it's hard to go back and see it any other way. So now it all comes down to one question. Were we really seeing something hidden behind the scenes, or were we just connecting pieces that were never meant to fit together? Because if a few clipped moments can create a story this convincing, what else have we believed just because it looked like a pattern? Drop your thoughts below. Do you think this was real influence, or just a narrative built from missing context? And if you want more deep dives like this, make sure you subscribe, because sometimes the biggest revelations aren't about what's hidden, they're about how easily we can be shown the wrong version of the truth.